So, hello and welcome, everybody. I hope you're well. In today's episode of the Sacred Wisdom podcast, we are going to be discussing giants, something that we have covered a lot within the Hidden History series. So, we certainly have had giants walk this earth, and there is many historic accounts of it. And going back thousands of years, we would have had probably civilizations of giants. So, Steve, tell us a little bit first of all, about the history of giants and maybe going back to the Atlantean, that kind of period. Tell us about a little bit about giants' history.
Well, I think we have to put it into context that humans or Homo sapiens are not the first bipedal, mammals to walk this earth. In terms of, bipedal life forms, giants were really the very first existences on planet Earth, and they predate human beings by many millions of years, in my opinion, and they had advanced civilizations. And obviously we've touched on this with the civilization of Hyperborea. Obviously in Greek mythology and Greek folklore, you had the idea of the Hyperborean giants and these Hyperborean cyclopses or cyclopean giants. But then we know, for example, from the Native American folklore that the giants, they were known as the white giants and the red-headed white giants on many occasions that many of the Native American tribes encountered. They already knew that these white giants had existed on the North American continent even before they themselves actually created settlements there.
And so just on that note, how did they know that?
Simply because they had advanced civilizations there when they arrived. So there's many accounts of these metallic shining cities high up in the Appalachian Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Cascade Mountain region in the United States of America. And these giants would come down, the white giants would come down. They were kind of like hunter-gatherers, and they would, gather up the resources they needed, and they would go back up into these remote areas in the Appalachian Mountains. I mean, these are really, rugged and very remote areas, and up in the Rocky Mountains, when you see what they're like geographically, and the Cascade Mountain region, even the Sierra Nevada in the United States of America. So we know that they have a very archaic genetic and cultural connection to planet Earth. Now, the key here is how far back into ancient history do we go? I don't think the giants themselves are indigenous to this planet. I've touched on this before, and I do believe that they themselves actually came here from other planets and moons. I believe that they transported themselves here. I don't believe they were brought here. And we know that from certain ancient accounts of alien abduction and UFO phenomena-based stories from Native American folklore, that some of the giants, actually known as the Nordic giants, have been seen around UFO craft, metallic flying discs. So we know, again, there's a connection between certain types of giants and certain geographic land masses on planet Earth, but they predate human beings. You have to also remember, if you look at Greek mythology, you have the Titanomachia, and this was, that actually means war of the vengeful beings, or the Vengers. So then after that, a lot of people get muddled up with this. They assume that the Titanomachia was the same as the Gigantomachia. They were actually listed as two separate events. Now, the actual giants actually, and according to Greek mythology and Greek folklore, they genetically evolved or emerged from the much even larger titans that had existed. These are beings that were 150, 200, 250 plus feet in height.
Wow. And so what Ray Harryhausen covered in his Clash of the Titans. Of course.
Yes, absolutely. So we know that from Greek mythology, you go onto the Gigantomachia, this is the war of the giants. So you have this vast, antediluvian battles that were going on between the 12 Olympians under Zeus Olympos, just in the perspective of Greek mythology, against these much older giant titans and giants. So we know even symbolically in Greek mythology, in Greek folklore, for example, as is Native American folklore, that they have a very anciently founded basis for existing on planet Earth. We also know in the Antarctic continent, they have uncovered, archaeologists there working for what we class as the military industrial complex have uncovered what appear to be the skeletal remains, and it's even been purported they have found the actual completely pristine bodies of what appear to be giants 12 to 14 feet in height in cryogenic suspension that were buried in vast subterranean laboratories or catacombs of some nature, within the Antarctic continent. So we know that there must have been some worldwide civilization. I think it was definitely connected to the civilization of Hyperborea, which obviously extended across the Arctic North Polar region, including Iceland and Greenland, Spitsbergen and northern Russia, and what in Greek mythology was known as the Riphaean Mountains, which referred to the polar Ural Mountains and the northern Ural Mountains, where vast communities of giants were believed to have existed many thousands of years ago. We know that from Hyperborea emerged the civilization of the Scythians, and many of the Scythians were described as red-headed white giants. Again, we've got this genetic correlation with these red-headed white giants of the North American continent and the battles they had against their various Native American tribes. So we know that they go back into very ancient history.
Do you think historically, once upon a time, all humans were once a very tall height, and over time the height of humans has been more and more reduced in society? What do you think on that?
I think humans were taller themselves. I don't think that. Okay, so Titans and giants, there are major DNA and genetic differences to humans.
Yeah, definitely.
So there is a genetic ancestral connection, just as there's genetic ancestral connections between different races of humans on planet Earth. But at the same time as that, yes, you can have 7 foot tall human beings or Homo sapiens, but they were never actual giants themselves. But yeah, in ancient history, it's believed the gravitational field around planet Earth was a lot lighter than it is today, the G-force around planet Earth, and therefore,
humans grew to a bigger height.
They could grow a lot taller, basically. Yeah.
I find it interesting the way, the toxins we have come into our bodies, the foods we eat, these do stump our growth. They do limit our growth in what we are. So, in the sense of the deities, the battles that happened and the giants that betrayed the Olympos, they actually sent them to Tartarus. That is correct, right. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, Tartaros was this giant, almost boundless depth below the surface of planet Earth. So again, we've got a correlation with the Hollow Earth theory. So there's a connection there between these antediluvian titans or antediluvian giants connecting to Greek mythology and Greek folklore, and the 12 Olympians, who were these superhumans with this advanced occult technology. Zeus and his thunderbolt. Was it a thunderbolt? Was it an advanced type of laser weaponry? We don't know. Again, that's just sheer speculation. But what we're looking at is you had these advanced superhumans who, if you take a look at Greek mythology, have connections to the islands of Atlantis and the civilization of Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean. And then you have these giants that are classed as a social nuisance. They have to be dealt with. They're not culturally they
don't fit into the system correctly, do they? They have to make different heights of buildings and different doorways. Yeah, kind of very regulated height. So it makes sense in that way, is to kind of keep consciousness under control, keep everyone the same size and regulated. Sorry, going off. Sorry, Steve.
Well, that's almost like a form of biological uniformitization or biological standardization going on there, where whatever the powers that be are, I don't want to get into speculating on that. That's a kind of a subject for another day. But if we just posit the idea that we have this ruling elite that wanted to manage a system, they didn't want giants, they don't want little folk, they didn't want elves, gnomes, and fairies, and all these different so-called supernatural beings or entities. They wanted condensed, slower vibration of humans or Homo sapiens that have, easily manageable consciousness and thoughts and behavior patterns, and they're predictable. They want humans, and they react by being controlled through fear and coercion. I feel something like this was going on, probably even going back 50,000 BC to the Paleolithic age, that there's been so much intervention by extraterrestrials, and the giants were seen as a humanoid type grouping on this planet that were not going to be compatible with this control structure they wanted to bring in.
And people need to understand that this did exist. There's the Father Carlos, wasn't it, in the Ecuadorian jungle that 10,000 years ago that found these bones, and they were carbon dated to be 10,000 years old.
Yes.
So,
well, we know, for example, that South America, like Central America, Latin America in general, is one of the really like northern Russia, is one of these large geographic expanses where there are so many anomalies, from the Ica stones in western Peru to obviously the dinosaur figurines of Acambaro in central Mexico,
and all under the Amazon as well. What they're discovering, I mean,
all of these areas, and in the Amazon rainforest, as in the Ecuadorian rainforest and other remote areas of South America, dinosaurs are still seen. Giants have been seen that are
just out of interest, when you said about dinosaurs are seen, where was that?
Dinosaurs have not recently, but regularly, both in the Colombian rainforest, because obviously they're overlapping the geographic borders between countries in South America. So you go from the Mato Grosso region, which is it basically means thick bush. It translates to thick bush in western Brazil, which is an incredibly remote area. It's believed to be interlaced with vast thousands of kilometers of subterranean passages. Whether they're artificial or natural, it's never been verified. And there's large cavernous openings there. There's believed to be purported openings into the hollow earth in that part of Brazil and South America. Now, I would say that those giants that survived the biological eradication in ancient history on this planet, and this does connect to the civilization of Great Tataria in northern Russia, including Siberia, a lot of them would have escaped into the deep subterranean reaches below the surface of planet Earth for sanctuary and safety. Yeah. And I think they rebuilt down there. And, there's always been that sort of mockery in the mainstream media. I mean, they'll give headlines like, "Oh, well, the Hollow Earth is populated by giants, lizards, and National Socialist Germans and stuff like that."
Yeah.
It's a way of constantly belittling and ridiculing and making fun of the subjects, and the whole thing is then disregarded as irrelevant. So people don't focus on actually analyzing the data, looking at the historical records, researching. I mean, it's like when you look at the folk tales of the American Indian tribes, they're absolutely incredible. And a lot of their, tales talk about the Hollow Earth. They talk about descending through passages into the Hollow Earth and meeting light beings or luminous, the luminous white brothers and white sisters there. These ravaging, quite violent, red-headed white giants that were 12 to 14 feet high, they battled with. Why did those giants become so savage? Was there a number of events that happened in ancient history where they pushed psychologically to the point where their own civilization was destroyed and they literally had to eke out an existence on the surface? I'd say there is probably a little bit of truth in that. We don't know the full history. Now, why is it the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., and it still denies it to this day, and yet there are hundreds of black and white newsprint articles going back over 100 years that show that, yes, thousands of skeletons of giants were deliberately transported.
Thousands of skeletons gone.
Yeah.
The Smithsonian Institute, in 2015, they admitted in court that they had been destroying skeletons of 6 to 12 feet in height, skeleton bones.
And I'll just say as an addendum to that, we know that large numbers of fishermen in Southern California that were doing trawling out at Santa Catalina Island, which is off the coast of that Santa Catalina Island in Southern California. Yes, so they were dredging up literally hundreds of giant skeletons, femur bones, giant skulls, craniums, and they were estimating some of these giants would have had to be at least 14 to 16 feet tall.
Wow.
And then at the same time, as a side note to that, we know that there's many, many legends of little folk or little people from, the Cherokee Indians and many other Native American groups that talk of these little people that lived in subterranean passageways, who would only come out in the nighttime, especially on a full moon, and would literally explore the landscapes. And they've been eradicated, and yet they have found real skeletons of these little folk or little people. And again, the Smithsonian Institution comes in, there's complete suppression, the information is removed. Same as all the Serpent Mounds in the Ohio River Valley, for example, which were really burial mounds for these giants, the antediluvian white giants of North America, who had existed in vast numbers, both in the Great Plains, the Eastern Woodlands region, as well as up in the mountains, such as the Appalachian Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Cascade mountain ranges, so forth, in the United States of America. So they were the founders of the initial civilization there, and I do believe that somehow they were connected to the rudimentary emergence of the civilization of Tartaria.
And really interesting, what I find is the kind of whole Nordic mythology, that side of stuff, and the whole with the frost giants and all these different types of giants they had, because this is throughout every culture, guys. So every single history of folklore in every country has a story of giants. But particularly the whole kind of concept as well, where the trolls came about as well, because they're obviously part of the giants, but they're almost like this mutated giant, almost, that they've been rejected. I think we covered it a bit in the Tartaria episode of Hidden History, but I see the trolls and ogres as almost like giants that have been rejected from their environments, and they've been almost displaced in other environments that they've had to readapt to, and they haven't been able to. What do you think on that?
I think if you look at trolls and ogres, for example, so trolls were these had very distorted, kind of amorphic physical forms, very long arms, pot bellies, giant noses. So it was almost like the uglification of the giants was taking place, and these cultural distortions that were imposed and disseminated to the public. Same thing with ogres. They're classed as individuals that eat vast amounts of food. They're highly carnivorous. And they have no. I think
you mentioned it once about on a Tartaria episode that actually Tartarian giants could have been actual breatharians. Breatharians is where you actually live on a form of light. You don't need food in your body. You live on the light and the cosmic light. Am I correct, Steve, in saying that?
I mean, the language you're using is a little bit flowery, but technically, yes. What happens? Breatharians were individuals that had disciplined their body's metabolism through very deep, consistent meditation on a daily basis, and both AM and PM, 7 days of the week. It was almost like done in an incredibly you had to be very self-motivated in a very strict routine manner. So they were able to absorb the electrical energies through breath work into their bodies, and were able to control their heart rates, their respiratory systems, and somehow were able to absorb the electrical frequencies and vibrations, almost like what happened in Tartaria, where the absorption of telluric energy through, metallic strips that were fitted inside the chimneys of many of the buildings there. But they were able to do that on a biological level, and able to convert that electrical frequency or vibration into the energy that was somehow interfacing with their body's needs for vitamins and minerals, their nutrient levels. Now, we don't fully understand that. I believe there is a science there that's been hidden from the public. And that's all I can say on the matter, really.
Do you think the trolls and ogres maybe are like kind of breatharians, and they became almost like barbaric creatures, but due to the fact that they were so disconnected from their world that they lived in previously. What do you think on that? Because it seems that giants weren't so friendly all the time. You did have a lot of cases where giants were quite aggressive towards humans, angry. They seem very angry, and maybe this was something that's happened in their past, which would make a lot of sense. Maybe invaded, but you've also got the Sikash giants as well, which is incredible. All that story of the Native Americans. But what do you think about that? The ogres, trolls being kind of shunned out from their old world and then dumped into this world where they had to live. They did,
and then they would become derided, hated, despised, and then folk tales would be made about them being these horrific, oafish, badly mannered hominids that had no respect for human beings or Homo sapiens, had no cultural norms, and were just literally hunter-gatherers with a violent attitude. You look at the Solomon Island giants, for example.
Yeah, that's going to come onto that, yeah.
And incredibly brutal battles that went on. The same with all the Native American tribes in both the United States of America and in parts of Canada.
Just a little bit, because Solomon Islands particularly is an incredible part of the world. It's very remote as well. There's a lot of military presence on Solomon Islands, isn't there?
There is. There's a very large military industrial complex based presence there, and we know that it's believed that up in all the mountainous regions on the Solomon Islands, we have to remember the Solomon Islands is not one island, it's plural. There's a number of land masses interlinked there in that area. So we know that there is possibly entrances into the Hollow Earth, or at least large access tunnels. It's believed there's at least one or more deep underground military bases, or D1 bases, that have been obviously constructed covertly in the Solomon Islands, and maybe a deep underwater military base, or D2 base, where obviously submarines will dock at. We know that many of the Solomon Islanders regularly observe UFO activity in the more remote regions, and they can't explain it. And luminous discs or metallic silver-like discs are seen, emerging from mountainous regions, very remote, high-altitude locations, especially in the nighttime, or in the early hours of the morning, just before sunrise. So we know the Solomon Islands, there's a lot going on there. Somehow giants are connected to that. And again, Western science won't touch it. It's almost as if reality, whatever that is, in this material dimension, has to be consistently edited and reshaped and formatted consistently to keep it in this. It's everybody's focused on the narrow bandwidth and not focused on anything else, the minutiae, a lot of which is actually irrelevant to our lives here on planet, being human beings, having incarnations here. And, I think if we could really get a lot more information on the once very widespread existence of these titans and then the giants, and you were discussing that some of these giants seem very ferocious and rather unstable. We know from a lot of the studies there was probably at least 4 species of giants, and each one of them was of a different height. And these 4 different groups of giants, they interacted with each other, but they didn't particularly get on themselves. We also know from many of the carvings and paintings and woodcuts and so forth that have been created over the last few hundred years by explorers and adventurers or travelers to northern Russia, into the polar Ural Mountains, the northern Ural Mountains, in north central Russia and across Siberia, for example. They actually drew these pictures, or carved these pictures of what appear to be Tartarians, these Aryan looking men and women with what appear to be male or female giants of some nature. And the giants seemed very gentle and peaceful, and they were conversing with them in these illustrations or these woodcuts. So they would have been a sophisticated type of giant. And I believe a lot of these giants that had the occult technology, they actually traveled into the Hollow Earth, and I believe they exist there today. And the key to this is, we know there are all civilizations in the Hollow Earth. They resonate outside of linear space-time. Yeah. So to most human beings...
explain that a little bit when you say that they're existing outside of space-time, so people understand that what you mean by that is the other frequency. It's bandwidth. Go on, explain a bit.
That's right. Well, we're used to this this linear perspective of time and solidity and the tangible essence of what we see as this 3D holographic reality that seems very condensed and very solid. But that's one parameter in terms of quantum physics. So if for example, I'll give you the example as the astral plane, where you have entities or spirits, they are resonating at a rate of frequency and vibration it's too fast in terms of being able to observe it within the visible light spectrum, but they still exist. And the same kind of approach should be taken to understanding how civilizations exist within the hollow earth. And so I would say for people to observe giants as of little folk or little people like dwarves and gnomes and fairies and elves, etc., you'd have to be very receptive on a psychic level in yourself and prepared for that and able to unconsciously tune into that and be able to actually match, correlate your own frequencies and vibrations to those around you. Otherwise, everything would remain completely invisible to you. And people would say, well, that's absolute rubbish. They don't exist because I can't see them anywhere around me type. That's how a lot of people react.
Yeah, of course.
So
coming back to home and coming back to Britain, and we've got a lot of history of giants in this country, and obviously we've got some amazing stone structures that have been built, prehistoric stones. Stonehenge could have very well possibly been built by giants, and some others as well. The Catalina stones are very interesting stones, which is at the north top of Scotland.
Yes,
but with Britain, Steve, just on stone circles, do you feel that these, would have existed around that time and the construction of all these sites, that actually giants maybe constructed a lot of the stone circles by maybe levitation techniques, or they could have actually carried them? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I believe that they didn't use the logistical impossibilities that arise from trying to transport these vast slabs of really dense stone to construct, say, Stonehenge on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire is not worth even thinking about. It's the way
on sticks, Steve. It was done with sticks, and they pulled it on. Of course, it happened. Come on,
we have to abide by Western science, of course, because obviously they have to put themselves out there as the experts. You see, but so we know, for example, from Bonpo shamanism and Tibetan Buddhism, that the use of different small, medium, and large size metallic singing bowls create specific electroacoustic waveform patterns or cymatic patterns that can be used as literally like a sonic buffer that can levitate massive stone slabs. And we know that this is one of the pretty much the main method, or one of the main methods by which Tibetan Buddhists were able to construct many of their temples. And again, this has been lost in terms of occult technology on Western science that doesn't want to know about that. So I believe this technology, as with Great Tartaria, that were, the Tartarian Aryans were experts in cymatic-based occult technology. They fully understood how to use cymatic patterns to construct their own incredible, edifices, the architecture of their beautiful and elegant buildings. And this was the same thing with these antediluvian giants, that I believe that Stonehenge was originally built by giants by using this kind of cymatic-based occult technology. And I believe a lot of the later megalithic circles, so like the Rollright stones in Oxfordshire, and also Avebury Circle, for example, these were actually constructed by humans, but they were done as a way of emulating much older occult technology-based stone constructions, if that makes sense, on a smaller scale. But they could have quite easily positioned those in with hundreds of Celtic Britons could have put those into place. But the size of Stonehenge is just an impossibility to imagine something like that.
200 miles, the rocks, isn't it? 200 miles away.
It was a vast distance to go across, and then to get across into Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire like that is just not logistically possible. So we know, for example, also that what is unusual about Stonehenge is that people have taken photographs of the so-called hewn rock, and some of it in the photographs has been observed to have fallen away. These are black and white photos that have been taken going back, and again now that whole area is now all completely fenced off. You can't just go in amongst Stonehenge and film and photograph the actual Stonehenge rock
Absolutely
structure.
ridiculous as well, that is.
When these bits of external so-called hewn rock have fallen off, underneath is a completely symmetrical oblong block of stone, a giant rectangular oblong block
Okay,
of stone.
interesting.
So that they were all completely symmetrical, and that's because they were hewn by the use of cymatic based occult technology that was so concise. And you see this across these stone constructions in parts of Central America and South America. You can see the concise way a lot of these building blocks have been fitted together, and they don't have any mortar actually gluing them together either. So
there is no doubt that these giants are existing, and there is been giants on this planet. The information and strange stories that we see all around us, but we could definitely suggest that it could be. Like Stephen said, I mean, Stonehenge is pretty much a complete impossibility that was, dragged all that way, all that stones from, was it Northern Wales, wasn't it? They were taken
somewhere,
from.
and because the type of stone they used was only available in that area, and it's a very hard stone. And again, to hewn giant slabs of stone like that without actually breaking the stone.
Yeah,
it's like this one cut piece of stone, especially the standing stones. It doesn't make any sense, and it's the same kind of conundrums you get with the pyramids. The same thing with ziggurats and pyramids. You see the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, were they really hewn, those vast structures? Were they really put together by manual labor, by thousands of workers in that part of Central America? Or did they use cymatic-based occult technologies? And I would say it was very common. We know in Atlantis, cymatic-based occult technology was very much used. They used it to levitate themselves so they could transport themselves.
Do you think the giants had this ability, this cymatic knowledge to actually transport levitation techniques? Yeah, I would say so. And just moving on to now, do you think there is people in this world now that have this ability to do this?
Yes, I believe if you take a look at what happened with the Chinese Communist Party and Tibet, for example, one of the things they did was destroyed vast amounts of Buddhist monasteries. There was a lot of confiscation of what I believe now is occult technology that was very well concealed in many of those Buddhist monasteries across Tibet. But then again, you go up into the Tian Shan Mountains, the Himalayan mountains, the Kunlun Mountains, on the Asian continent, and there is vast amounts, I believe, of occult technology, some from perhaps Great Tartaria, some from Atlantis, some perhaps from the Hyperborea, caches of which are secretly stored away. And you could class these Buddhist monks that they have a purpose in terms of wanting to protect and conceal this anciently founded occult technology. And they don't want the outside world to know about it, because they probably know if it would be mismanaged, it would be misused, it would be used for malevolent reasons, to dominate, to control, to enslave, to subvert.
And the state of the world we're in now, that isn't far off what would happen as well. And people need to understand that there is many reasons to why this technology isn't with us yet, and all this information, because there are psychopaths in this world, many, crazy people, and in the wrong hands, this could do utter destruction with this technology. So we are going to grow into this in the correct way, and it's going to be, I feel, very positive when we actually regain all this knowledge, and how it's going to be reintegrated into the society.
Yeah.
But Stephen, again, as always, absolutely fascinating, amazing talk. Thank you once again. And please subscribe if you haven't already. You can also buy our Mysterious Realities book, which is available in paperback now, and you can also download as an ebook. And thank you, Stephen Denman. It's very nice of you to come along today.
You're welcome from me. And it's goodbye from me.